Let's get into it. Sold Not For Sale podcast. Coach Colin here. We got Joe Rogan, and he brings up what's going on in Brazil. If you don't know what's going on in Brazil, you're going to watch this and you're going to have a better understanding. I will say right away, I did a full breakdown on my other channel because we're breaking away from Rogan content there. But Joe Rogan mentioned it again, and don't want to say that he did it a disservice, because the fact that he brought it up on the biggest media platform in the world is still something, but there's more to it than what you're going to hear him talk about, and we're going to touch on all of that. So I got Joe talking about it. The person that he's interviewing, Brian O'Neill, goes into a beautiful speech about freedom of speech and how essential it is for people to speak up, because all the freedoms we have are given to us by people who stood up and spoke up. Then we're going to move on to Tucker Carlson. He's interviewing the president of Brazil, the former president of Brazil, his son. He's going to talk about what he's experiencing there, what it looks like for journalists and people in politics. Then I have a journalist who's actually going to talk about what he went through in terms of Brazil's censorship. And then he's going to actually talk about a bunch of people who have been taken down. It's very extensive. Let's just get right into it. Again, don't forget about that second channel that I got, Coach Colin Media. You can go there. I'm breaking away from the Rogan content there. We're trying to hit 2,000 subscribers, already hit 1,000. And yeah, go hit that subscribe button there. But otherwise, let's get out of this and let's go straight to that Joe Rogan clip.
You hear what's happening in Brazil right now?
What's happening in Brazil?
In Brazil, they are trying to get Twitter to suspend the accounts of political opponents.
Right.
And Twitter's not willing to do it, and so they're going to lose all ad revenue in Brazil, likely. I don't know how they're going to do it, but they're advocating for censorship at such a high level that it's becoming like it's a very strange crisis, because it's not being reported in mainstream media. You're not hearing about it unless it's trending on Twitter.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where you go, okay, what is the news, guys? Because this is like a big global event. If they're really trying to remove, like, imagine if Biden all of a sudden removed Rand Paul and Ted Cruz and had these people removed from social media. You can no longer post studies that conflict with the FDA's reports. You can no longer post anything. You're gone.
Yeah.
Your voice is erased. No one would accept that.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That's insane. But that's apparently what's happening right now in Brazil.
It's the role of social media in all of this, and it's great that Elon Musk's Twitter is standing up to it, but because the role of social media over the past few years has been so sinister. And you mentioned the Twitter files, the pre-Musk Twitter regime, which was more than willing to do the bidding of the American government, which was a complete and utter destruction of First Amendment rights. Just because the government went behind closed doors and said to its friends in Silicon Valley, please take this stuff down, that doesn't make it any less of a government intervention into people's freedom to speak and freedom to publish.
Right.
So governments they've outsourced censorship to private companies. And we've seen the same thing in the UK, where social media companies are forever being called before politicians, and they've been instructed to take this down, take that down. So I think governments who are too cowardly to censor through law, because they know it would be unpopular, they often use the back channel of private companies. They outsource the right to censorship to these private companies, and that's happened a huge number of times over the past decade. But it amounts to the same thing, which is state censorship, with the connivance and the complicity of these private companies. So I think one of the great crises of our times, actually, is the crisis of freedom of speech, because freedom of speech really is the thing that is the best guard against irrationalism. It's the best guard against hysteria. It's the best guard against things like giving kids puberty blockers when they shouldn't be taking them, and against the men parading around in women's changing rooms, and against COVID lockdowns, and against all the other manias that have afflicted our societies over the past decade. Freedom of speech is the best guard against all of that. It won't successfully slay all of them, but it creates that space in which a dissenting voice can say, hold on, let's wait a minute. Let's just think about this. Let's ask if it's correct to give a confused 12-year-old kid a drug that will fuck up his body and likely make him infertile and ruin his bones and possibly make him depressed. Let's just wait and think and ask, is this the right thing to do? And it was the crushing of all those voices of dissent on all of these issues that allowed the ideology to sweep over our society with such success. So time and again, in relation to Brazil that you've just mentioned, and in relation to our countries too, I just think if we unleash free speaking and allow people to express their dissenting views, a lot of these problems, they might still happen, but we would have the opportunity to rein them in.
Yeah, well, we would definitely have an ability to, if you don't have dissenting voices, that's fine if you're right and if you're on the right side. And that's the problem with people. They all love to think that they're right. And we have to shut these other people up.
Yeah.
These people, these anti-climate change people, they're going to get us killed. Who gives a shit what happened 1,000 years ago? We know it right now. We got to do something.
But I think people's devaluation of freedom of speech and dissent is so curious, because the way I always see it is that every freedom we enjoy is the gift of heresy. It's the gift of people in the past who put their head above the parapet and said the thing that you weren't supposed to say.
Sure.
Every single freedom.
Everything.
Everything. One of the examples in my book, A Heretic's Manifesto, one of the examples I give is William Tindale, who was this firebrand English Protestant in the early 1500s, who did something that changed the world forever. He translated the Bible into English. You weren't allowed to publish the Bible in English. It could only be published in Latin, because it was only supposed to be read by priests, by the educated classes. It wasn't for the riffraff. It wasn't for the rabble, and it was punishable by death to publish the Bible in English. And he said, "No, I don't give a damn. People need to be able to read the word of God for themselves." So he went to Germany, which was going through the Protestant Reformation, and he published the Bible in English, and it was spirited back into England. It was snuck back in under piles of grain, and his supporters would distribute it amongst the people, and it was read in pubs and by candlelight in case the police came knocking.
That's crazy.
And what's so interesting and important about this story is, firstly, that he was willing to dissent to such a degree that he risked his life. He was eventually caught and burnt at the stake for the crime of translating the Bible into English. But the other thing that's
What year
interesting,
is
this is 1530s, 1536.
So the same time as Martin Luther was translating into...
That's why he went to Germany, so he could do it there and then get it back to England. But what's interesting about it is that lots of people have forgotten William Tyndale's name. There's a statue of him in London on the embankment. They burned him at the stake. They gave him they killed him first. That was the only privilege they gave him. They killed him first and then burnt him at the stake. But what's interesting about this story, and there are so many others in history, is that people underestimate the extent to which our freedom today descends from the actions of people like that. Even your right to read the Bible in English, your right to access the Word of God yourself, should you want to, comes from people who were willing to risk life and limb in order to do something that you weren't supposed to do, that it was forbidden to do, that it was verboten, it was illegal. So every time I see people crushing dissent, whether it's on the gender issue, whether it's on COVID, whether it's on climate change, whether it's on anything else, I just think to myself, you have no idea of the extent to which your own luxurious life, your relatively free life, the position you have in society today, is the gift of people in the past who were willing to put their head above the parapet and say the thing you shouldn't say. So we underestimate that at our peril. And I think it is really important to remind people that heresy is essential to freedom, and allowing people to be heretical, I think, is very important.
And in this time when things are so divided, it's such a dangerous thing, because so many ideas are connected to one ideology or the other. Either you're with us or against us.
Yeah.
And bizarre things are connected politically in some very strange way. There's certain subjects, if you bring them up, I can kind of make an assumption about the whole group of ideas that you subscribe to.
Yeah,
and that's also a function of limiting freedom of speech too, and creating these echo chambers.
And it's like, yeah, exactly. And
Jamie, can we get some coffee in here? We forgot to get our coffee. Thanks, sir. We can keep going.
Yeah,
we're still going.
I think that's absolutely right. And freedom of speech, I think even people on our side of the discussion, as we might like to call it, I think they underestimate the power of freedom of speech. It's often presented as, freedom of speech is the thing that allows us to settle discussions without violence and to ensure that everyone gets to express their point of view. That's true. But too often, I think freedom of speech is presented almost as like a soothing balm, the thing that calms society down. I think it's more important than that. Freedom of speech is the thing that makes us human. Freedom of speech is the thing that allows us to be genuinely autonomous people who make up our minds for ourselves. Under systems of censorship, what happens is that we are grotesquely infantilized. We are reduced to the level of children whose minds will be furnished with the ideas that society thinks are good, rather than having the right to make up our minds for ourselves. The great slavery abolitionist Frederick Douglass made this point. He said, censorship is a double crime. It's firstly the crime of stopping someone from saying what they want to say, which is terrible, but it's also the crime of stopping other people from hearing everything and deciding for themselves what is true and what is false, what is right and what is wrong. And it's that impact of censorship that we, I think, underestimate the importance of, because what censorship does, it doesn't just stop you from, when you had that those millennial twats at Spotify freaking out over Joe Rogan and his podcast and vaccination, etc. It doesn't only threaten to restrict someone like you and other individuals from saying what you want to say. It also deprives ordinary people, the public, the masses, of the right to hear everything and to use their mental and moral muscles. John Milton made this point in England in the 1640s. He said, the moral muscles are like the physical muscles. They benefit from exercise. And just as if you let your physical muscles go to waste, you'll become a bit of a wreck. Similarly, if you let your moral muscles go to waste, you'll become a moral wreck as well, because you will become an ape-like creature who has to be told what to think, who has to be told how to behave. It's far preferable, I think, to allow people to exercise their moral muscles, to use them on a daily basis. We go to the gym for our physical muscles. We should be able to exercise our moral muscles in public life by hearing all sorts of opinions and by deciding for ourselves, using our own critical faculties, what we think is right and what we think is wrong.
Unquestionably.
Wow. For a guy who didn't know what's going on in Brazil, he summed it up perfectly. He may not know what's going on politically and everything, but he understands the concepts that are happening currently, or, the concept of freedom of speech that they're trying to take away in Brazil. He understands that perfectly. That was really well said. Especially the thing he said about freedom is a gift from the past. He didn't quite say, I'm paraphrasing, but that's very true. It's a gift from the past when you think about it. And it's crazy because I always have, this is a Bible, and I always have it right here. And right away, it made that story that he just told made me realize I need to read it more, because it's a gift. It's actually a gift. Even past religious, it's a gift from a person who was like, I'll die to make sure that you could have this and that you could just read it. Whatever you think of it, it doesn't matter. I just want you to be able to read it. Absolutely epic, man. I didn't think of that. Wow. Caught me off guard. I listened to this before, but thinking about it again with the Bible sitting right there is a little different case. But anyways, what's going on in Brazil right now? I kind of want to touch on what he's talking about, but then I also want to kind of just jump right into it. We'll touch a little bit on what the things he said. Outsourcing authoritarianism. He said outsourcing, oppressing the people. That's very true, and that does happen in other governments. I mean, honestly, like, you look at BLM and what happened, and you can look at that and be like, well, they did some things that other elites might have saw to be the right thing to do. It helped a certain agenda to have everything that happened around BLM happen, and there's many organizations like that. Klaus Schwab once said, oddly quoting Klaus Schwab, it's like quoting Stalin. He was talking about how these groups, these organizations, they are important to what he's doing because they inform people about what they should be concerned about. And I remember when he said that, I was like, that makes so much sense. They pop up out of nowhere and they let you know, right? Like, even going back to BLM, they let you know, hey, there's an attack on black people. The police are, there's a siege happening on black people, black men. That's what's happening. And then, thank God, even in the vein of this, thank God for someone like Ben Shapiro. He kept talking about the numbers. He kept bringing up the cold, hard facts back before he was like super emotional the way he is now. He kept bringing up cold, hard facts to let people know, no, it seems that way, but these are the actual numbers. This is what's actually going on. And funny enough, Candace Owen back then was backing him up, and they were actually a brilliant team. So sad that they're not doing that anymore. And again, to what he was talking about, Brian O'Neill, that's the gentleman's name. He was talking a little bit about whether he realizes it or not, mass formation. And I've talked about this so many times, and I'll keep on bringing it up. But the one thing that needs to happen in order for it to stop in a society is people have to get nudged awake. And that's pretty much what he was talking about in terms of people have to speak up. You do have to speak up. It does actually change things. It does impact things. It stops the lunacy from taking over, whatever it might be in whatever society or time it is. It stops it from happening. And there's so many cases. I think Russia was used as a case once where the people stopped speaking out in public and they started going underground. And they felt like that was a better way to do it. Like, oh, we got to be underground, we got to be quiet about this. But what actually happened was they minused their voices from society, and then everything was able to happen in terms of communism and these authoritarian ideas. They had no pushback. There was pushback in the night. There was people talking in the night, but they were being so secretive that the rest of society couldn't hear it. And it's important that the rest of society hears the things that you have to say. So let's move on to what's going on in Brazil. Basically, Rogan did do it kind of justice. That is what's happening. This man here is a Supreme Court judge. His name's Alexander de Moraes. De Moraes is his name. So basically, what's going on right now is he is Brazil's Klaus Schwab. They have their own personal Klaus Schwab. He is not in a position to run things, but it seems like for some reason he is running things. He released a president who was doing a 9-year sentence. This guy Lula, he was doing a 9-year sentence. He stepped in, reduced it to 2 years, or at least let him out after 2 years. Then that same gentleman that he let out of jail became president. So people are looking at it like, you got him out, and now conveniently he is doing everything that you think is the thing to do. So they have been trying to silence voices. And I'll just show you a little bit of what Elon Musk, this is how him and Elon Musk ended up butting heads. Elon Musk was asked to do what the old Twitter would have done. Just throttle people down, ban accounts. Here you go. Here's the list. Make sure it gets done. Twitter's under a whole different leadership now, so it wasn't happening. Here's Elon Musk talking about it. Oh, what is this? Silenced? No.
This Judge Alexander, that's his name on Twitter, at Alexander, and there would be to suspend accounts. Immediately, we were given typically 2 hours to suspend an account or face massive fines. And the final straw is we were being given demands to suspend sitting members of the parliament and major journalists. And moreover, we could not tell them that this was at the behest of Alexander Morales. We had to pretend that it was due to our rules of service. And that was the final straw, and we said no. Demands from...
So the reason that I'm showing you this is because it turned out to be a lot more than just Elon Musk said no. After he said no, the government of Brazil has now put an inquiry into investigating him for obstruction of justice. And also they are looking into him in terms of a criminal organization, using X for some kind of criminal organization. They're baseless. And again, conveniently, he says no to this judge, and then all of a sudden the entire government comes down hard on him. It's gotten to the point where it's not just that he said no and he could face fines and now it's bad. He's shutting down his Brazil office. All the employees are now under threat of being arrested. They've been told that they will be arrested. He's trying to get them somewhere safe. When he does, he's actually going to dump all the files showing what the Brazilian government was requesting of him and how corrupt it all is. So it's way worse than, I'm sure Joe doesn't know, he doesn't have time to find out about this at length, but it's way worse than it sounds from what Joe was saying. Now, we'll get into a little bit of Tucker Carlson. We got Tucker Carlson talking to the former president's son. So his dad was put in jail. And his dad is seen as Brazil's Trump. That's what his dad is seen as, right? So like imagine Eric Trump or Donald Trump Jr. going through this type of stuff. Turn on your captions right now. This gentleman has a very strong accent. Let's get into it.
So if you have electronic voting machines with no way to recount and no way to prove what the votes actually were, if you're in favor of that, clearly you're committing fraud. I mean, what would be the other reason to be in favor of that?
They say that it would be an anti-democratic comment of you and they will shut it down here in Brazil.
So if I was a Brazilian citizen and I was in your media and I said what I just said,
no, they would shut down your social media. It's exactly what happened with Paulo Figueiredo. Paulo Figueiredo is someone like you, Tucker.
Wait a second. I would not be allowed to say that in Brazil?
If you say it would be only once.
Only once.
Only once. Then they're going to shut you down. And if you keep doing, they send the FBI to your house. And if you keep doing, they freeze your accounts. Just what happened with Paulo Figueiredo. That's why he's living here together with Alan dos Santos and Rodrigo Constantino. Paulo Figueiredo was used to have daily millions and millions of Brazilians watching him. Imagine you, Tucker, having like the best moment of your career in Fox News, and the Supreme Court justice says, okay, you cannot say that Lula is convicted. You cannot say that he has connection with Maduro and Daniel Ortega. You cannot say that he has ties with the PCC, the largest organized crime in Brazil. It happened. You can Google it. You're going to see that.
Yes, I can imagine that, if that's the question. That's the question. But I can't imagine living in a society where you're just not allowed to say it anywhere. I mean, anywhere. So you're saying if I write that on X, if I broadcast it on a television channel, if I say it in a podcast, if I say it enough, I'll be shut down.
Yes, or even more than that. For example, when you've been in Brazil, you met Felipe Martins, right?
Yes.
Is the Jared Kushner of Jair Bolsonaro.
Yeah, I know him well, yeah.
Special advisor. This guy now is in jail.
Why is he in jail?
It's a good question. It's the same question that we do. And see, he's in jail because, at least what we see,
like literally in jail.
He accomplishing a preventive jail is what we say before the judgment. You are in prevent jail to guarantee that he's not making confused with the investigations, or to guarantee that the law will be applied against him so he can't run away. I don't know, in fact, what moved Alexandre de Moraes to send him to jail, but as is very usual in dictatorships, they go around the leader of the opposition movement, arresting people, sending the federal police or their, we say, SS guard, arresting and sending to the house of the other people. My brother, Carlos,
yes,
he received the visit of the federal police. Everybody that's around Jair Bolsonaro are being arrested or receiving the federal police in their houses to do some research orders, warranties from Alexandre de Moraes.
Has it happened to you?
Not yet, but I think naturally one day it will happen.
Do you think you can stay in Brazil?
I don't feel that I can say everything that I want, even if I'm now a congressman and the most voted congressman in the history of Brazil, former chair of the Foreign Affairs and National Defense Committee, and son of the former president. Because if they sent a congressman to jail because he recorded a video, they can do anything they want. That's why I'm telling you, I have to make sure about my words before, especially talk about election, and in the past also about the pandemic.
Whew, man. So he actually wants to go back to Brazil, and that's why he's saying he has to watch his words, because if he says anything too out of order, they will either give him, the feds will come to his house and kind of have a conversation about what he was saying, or he might end up like the special advisor. I don't know if you guys could understand that. He said a special advisor who was attached to his father is now in jail, someone that Tucker Carlson actually met. So very, very wild what's going on in Brazil right now. And when it comes to Elon Musk and those fines per account, the other clip that I brought up, that's $20,000 per account that he does not shut down. That's what the government's going to fine him. No idea if that's per day or per month or how that works. I would guess with the way that this government is going, it'll probably be something like per day. And it's just very telling that if you speak up, they'll shut you down. They'll put pressure. And it's funny enough, I noticed something like that happen. I forget where the woman was. I forget where she was. I want to say Ohio, but I'm not 100% sure. And she said some people visited her. And, well, she didn't even say it. She was filming them. She was actually filming them. She's like, what is this about? It's like, oh, something you posted on social media. And these guys weren't suited up or anything. They were plain clothes, but they said they were part of an agency and they were trying to ask her about something that she posted. It seemed so Orwellian. It was wild. I got another clip for you guys. This is an actual journalist that's talking to Tucker Carlson. This journalist is breaking down what happened to him, and I have another clip of him talking about what happened to Brazil's Joe Rogan, what happened to Brazil's Alex Jones, and how many people have sought asylum and gotten it in Brazil so far to America. Let's go.
So much for coming on.
It's an honor to be here. I don't know how it happened, so I can't give you details.
So just to be clear, you're fully Brazilian.
Yes, I was born in
Your
Brazil.
grandfather was president of Brazil.
Yes.
You're fully vested in the country.
Yeah.
You're not just like some guy who showed up in Brazil to cover things.
If I was in the U.S., I would say my family came in the Mayflower.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, exactly. So but now you're living in exile in the United States without a Brazilian passport. What is that?
Well, I didn't even know that was possible because until I believe 2020, the only people the Brazilian government seized the passport was an international drug dealer.
Yes.
People were looking for him and they had to seize his passport. But then I was working normally on a regular TV station in Brazil, like mainstream media, doing a conservative show on prime time. We had millions of people watching it. It was the most watched political show in the country. And on December 30th of 2022, I received a call from someone that worked on a big social media company saying, well, we received a court order from the Superior Federal Court, the Supreme Court of Brazil, saying that we have 2 hours to take down your social media platform. And I had 1.5 million followers there on that specific one. And then I was like, wow, I'm not going to say the name because I don't want to expose the person that informed me. And I was like, wow. So I went live streaming and I said, look, apparently I'm going to disappear. But later I found out because I got a call from a federal police officer saying, look, the order against you is broader. Apparently they ordered to freeze all your assets in the country. They also ordered that we going to seize your passport and you can't get in the country. And I was like, wow.
What was the crime?
So I was never formally notified. So there's nothing anywhere that I committed any crime or that I'm being accused or charged of anything. But apparently they just decided that was best for the Brazilian people not to hear from me.
Well, that's totalitarian.
It is, but Brazil is now, Lula call it a relative democracy, but the fact is the things that are happening in Brazil only happen in dictatorship countries.
Well, that's just an incredible story.
But it was not only to me, I have to say that. So there's a colleague of mine. So 10 days later or 12 days later, after the January 8th happened in Brazil.
And just for context, I should say, so you said that you were stripped of your platform and told that you were having your passport taken.
But I was still on TV.
You were still on TV?
Yeah.
And that was like on the second to last day of Bolsonaro's presidency. I mean, he had been declared the loser in the election.
Right.
But nothing had even happened. Is that correct?
Nothing happened, and I stayed on air. But on January 8th, the revolt happened in Brazil, the protests, the demonstrations. And on January 9th, the Department of Justice opened an investigation against the TV station that I worked for. And when they did that, the owners panicked and they had to fire all the conservative commentators and only the conservative commentators from the station. And they used to be number one in terms of viewership. And of course, now they're not doing well because they lost. You know what happens with the.
I do.
Yeah. When they get rid of their stars, right?
So, yeah, that's also going on. So it turns out this guy sounds like he was Brazil's Tucker Carlson. Sounds like they were on Fox News. Is very conservative. They had to get rid of everybody under threat of who knows what could happen from the government. Assets frozen, committed no crime whatsoever. I say it, I have a video that I've done about this whole thing on my other channel, and I'll say it again here. Only steps behind. That's why it's so important. Usually I want to focus on, the border, and there's years of fentanyl crisis. There's so many different things to focus on. But in this other nation, I know it's another continent, it's another nation, but it's so important to look at it because just steps behind. All of this sounds familiar. Everyone listening to what this guy is saying right now and what the other gentleman was saying could easily line up events that have taken place right where the soil is, right under their feet. So, man, so crazy that this is happening. I got another clip here of this gentleman speaking about, just more people who've gotten taken down. Let's play this.
But very mild, and they're not reporting what's happening.
But if they take one of the most famous journalists in a huge country, I'm not sure Americans understand how big Brazil is. It's like the United States.
220 million people.
Yeah, 220 million with massive area and
as big as territorial the continental United States.
Exactly. So it's not an insignificant place.
No.
I mean, it's not Suriname. I don't understand how the new government can shut down a journalist because they don't like his opinions.
Not one.
Of his passport. And the U.S. State Department doesn't say anything.
Well, not one journalist. We have at least 3 journalists. Actually, there's the case of a podcaster. It was kind of like Joe Rogan in Brazil. This very liberal guy.
Yeah.
That was taken down as well, and he's living in the U.S. under asylum. And we have I would say we have dozens of Brazilians living on political asylum in the United States right now. It wasn't my case because I was already here, but many others, yes. You have Alan dos Santos, his unbelievable his story. He was kind of like our Alex Jones in Brazil, more vocal.
Yes,
but still he has the right of his opinions. I didn't agree with him all the time, and they shut down his channel. It was a big company by then, had a studio, everything. The federal police raided his house with his wife pregnant, pointing guns at him. It was a nightmare. And we're talking about a guy who was like a family man. And he has been living here in the United States. And there's an open arrest warrant. He was on Interpol Red Notice list right now.
For what?
For a crime of opinion. For the terms they use are misinformation and attacking the institutions. But when I say, well, attacking means criticizing, right? You're public officials. It's my duty as a journalist to criticize you.
You work for us.
Yes,
yeah.
You work for us. I don't work for you. So, but that's what happened to him. And there's Rodrigo Constantino. It was my colleague, same station, also lots of viewers. And
what American journalists, these defenders of press freedom, have said anything about this?
No, except for Glenn Greenwald.
Yes, who lives there.
He lives there in Brazil. And except for him, he's on the left. You know him very well. He was always on your show. But he was the only one that spoke anything about it.
Do you worry?
Wow. Well, shout out to Glenn Greenwald. If you don't know who that is, you should definitely check him out. He's on X heavily. He's actually in Brazil. He's American, and hopefully nothing happens to him. They actually do touch on that in this video. The journalist, his name is Paulo. He says they might be a little more careful around someone who's actually an American citizen, but when it comes to their own citizens, it's just free game. Do whatever, no crime needed. What's really funny in that clip, he says this almost like Tucker may not understand. He goes, they say misinformation, and everybody watching right now is like, yeah, they do. Of course they do. They always say misinformation. They always say it's an attack. They always say that the words are violence. They always do that in order to get their way and to make it seem like what you've done in terms of sharing your opinion is far more heinous than it actually is. Oh, man. I'm telling you, man, just steps behind. Steps behind. Got to watch out for it. Now, I don't know what you could do. I'm just trying to tell you what's going on in Brazil and how similar it looks to so many different events that have happened. But yeah, very interesting. And it goes right back, just even hearing this gentleman talk, Paulo, even hearing him talk, it goes right back to what Brian O'Neill, the guest that Joe Rogan had on, exactly what he was saying. The people that spoke up, freedom is a gift from the past, and it's given to you by people who chose to stand up. If this gentleman just decides to go along with things as they say, they should be in Brazil, he has no problems. He has zero issues. But instead, he's choosing to stand up. He's choosing to speak. And somebody will benefit from that. Hopefully, if it doesn't get turned into a police state, someone will benefit from that years from now. And, you know, it's just like I have a list of people here when you talk about it. Because think about it. The politicians right now, they're people who are speaking up. The Brazilian politicians, they're speaking up and speaking out. The journalists are speaking up. The Twitter staff, like I said, they're under threat of being arrested. They've committed no crime. All they're doing is their job. They're deciding to stand up. Elon Musk is standing up. You know, whether I don't agree with brain implants, and I think it's a slippery slope, and I think he knows exactly where that goes, but at the same time, he is standing up to this government. He's making sure that his employees don't get arrested. But then again, when it comes to, I want to use the analogy of comedy, because right now when I go on stage, I have this bit that I'm working on, and it has elements of race in it, gender, all sorts of stuff that people would find wildly offensive. And the only reason that I can think of this bit and put it on my phone and say, yeah, I'm going to go work on that. That should be about 4 minutes. Okay. My intro will be 30 seconds. Okay. I have a good 5 minutes here. I'm going to tighten it up. The only reason I can do that is because of Lenny Bruce. That's the only reason I can do it. Because he decided to be wildly offensive. He decided he wasn't going to back down. He was going to keep on doing it. George Carlin, same thing with the 6 or 7 words you can't say on air. And then he would say them all the time. Getting thrown into jail. There's so many people like that in comedy, in politics, journalism, so many. Whew. Even Trump. I even have Trump on the list because right now, we can't realize it because we're in it. When you were watching Lenny Bruce and he was doing his thing, you didn't understand. You were like, this is ridiculous. It's offensive. Yeah, whatever. You didn't realize it leads to Dave Chappelle. You didn't realize it gives freedom. It gives people the freedom to become a Dave Chappelle, to become a Louis C.K., to become a Bill Burr. No one realizes that as it's happening. And right now with Trump, you don't realize what's happening. Who right now is a young businessman that's going, yeah, I can be president. Yeah, I'll handle that. Yeah, I can handle that because I'm seeing it. I'm seeing somebody do it. You know? Oh man, it's so crazy what's going on over there. So again, I'll just reiterate, the employees might be arrested. Elon Musk might be arrested, or maybe they'll issue a warrant for his arrest so he cannot operate in Brazil via anything. He can't go there. And again, Tucker brought it up. Brazil is huge. It's the size of territorial America. It is huge. It has 220 million people in it. It's a huge nation for this to be happening. This is not an island that this is happening to. This is a giant place. And the fact that there's even remotely some people that are willing to stand up. You know, again, it's funny. I want to say like freedom is contagious. Standing up is contagious. It really is. It's a contagion. It spreads around. Because the second that I heard this, I was like, oh, well, I have to make a video about this. And I have to say what's really on my mind. And I have to bring people the facts. And someone else is going to see it. And somebody else might do something. Or maybe just another person makes another video. And we're all just getting inspired. And that's why it's important that Joe Rogan brought it up. And that's why it's important that you guys hear about it. And don't just hear about it and be like, sucks to be Brazil. Steps behind. Always, I love talking to people who are Cuban. I love talking to people who have come from Russia, who are older. And I just want to know, how did it happen? How did it happen that the place turned like that? I've never met someone from China that's like been through it, but I'd love to know, how did it happen? Because so many people from Cuba, they're looking at everything going on in the past 4 years and they're like, this is how it starts. And it's fallen on deaf ears for the most part. But they're like, this is what happens. This is how they do it at first. You know, and the one thing that made me, the reason that I'll make videos about the Dutch farmers and what's going on in France with the farmers and all this stuff, because of one story I got from my buddy's wife, Cuban lady, amazing woman. She was telling me about how the cattle, they came for the cattle. They came to the farmers wanted to buy the cows. It's going to be better for everybody. Don't worry about it. Everyone's going to benefit from this. And then all of a sudden the next week they came and they said, if you slaughter any of your cattle, you're going to jail for life. And they went, what? And they said, well, I'm going to get profits from all the milk and everything, right? And they got a small percentage. And then all of a sudden you see Ireland and they're trying to put a plan out to cull cattle, and they just want the farmers, we just need to take over your farms a little bit. I don't know, man. It's where it starts. But definitely pray for Brazil and look into this situation more as it develops. Elon Musk might get arrested. His employees might get arrested. And, you know, I'm laughing as I say that, but it's crazy what's going on. And again, the man in power, supposedly, allegedly, is this man. This man released the current president from jail early. All of a sudden, that man who's released from jail early wins the election. How he won the election? It was 50.9% he got, and his opponent, which is this gentleman's son, this gentleman's father, he lost by he had 49.1. So that was just how much they lost by. And a lot of people are feeling like it's illegitimate, and they don't even have the technology to look into it because the government didn't allow that technology to come into play at all into the election. So it's bad all over. And again, it's conveniently everything that this gentleman wants is exactly what the president wants. It seems like he's just running things from behind the scene, which is why I called him Brazil's Klaus Schwab. Anyways, guys, I know I'm going a little long here, but just wanted to bring you all that information so you know what's going on in Brazil. It's not just the fact that X is going to lose lose advertising dollars. It's way past that. The staff might be arrested. We don't know what's going to go on with Elon Musk. They're almost at a technology blackout. Anybody who speaks up gets shut down completely. It's wild. It's absolutely wild. And their protests are just massive right now. That's the last thing I'll show you. This was actually their protest. And somebody said that this is the reason why X is public enemy #1 in Brazil, because the mainstream media wouldn't report on this massive protest, but it went viral on X. And everybody in Brazil got to see this, and everybody around the world got to see it as well. Huge protest. Absolutely huge. Anyways, guys, like, subscribe, share. Other than that, I'm out.